Our panel today, I will let Ashley and the folks on the panel introduce themselves, but Ashley Mahan is the advocate, evangelist, for the FedRAMP program at GSA. She has an incredibly strong security background, and she's going to be the one really sticking it to these system integrators and other feds that we're going to have up here. This should be an incredible panel, and I'm looking forward to it a lot. Ashley, if you guys are ready, ladies and gentlemen, please come on up. Yep.
Okay. Oh. Great. Good morning, everybody. How are you today? I shouldn't ask a loaded question when I'm up here because then you go, great, all right, doing well, so all these different answers. But thank you for your time today. We have a fabulous panel here with us. We're going to be talking about DevSecOps. So with that said, over the last few years, you have seen a need across government to move from a DevOps approach to more of a DevSecOps approach. There's bad actors out there. They're growing exponentially. There's increasing cyber threats that are constantly evolving, and agencies are becoming increasingly aware of risks that pose a threat to their data. And it has been said that DevSecOps is like DevOps, but with more or less security baked in. And being that FedRAMP evangelist, I am just absolutely in love with that concept. So as DevSecOps is the next iteration of security, that is why we have this awesome all-star panel with us today that are all at the epicenter of this new critical field. They've joined us to share their stories and best practices from government and industry. And with that said, I'd love for each panelist just to take a few minutes to introduce yourself, starting with Sarah Fahden at USCIS.
I am Sarah Fahden, and I'm at the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Organization. I've been there for almost 8 years. I started my career in security. In the security field, I have kind of a unique perspective because I spent many, many years in just IT security and then transitioned over to development and managing development teams. And so from the beginning, I definitely always had my security hat partially on still. And wanted to ensure that everything that we built and provided was developed with security baked in from the beginning, and that the teams that we were purchasing were fully loaded with security as well, and that was a core talent that was included, you know, with every full stack engineer. So that's kind of my background.
Chris?
I'm Chris Egan with IBM, and I'm in our cybersecurity and biometrics group within our Federal Services Division. I've been supporting federal customers for about 20 years now, previously with PricewaterhouseCoopers and then with IBM. It's really mostly on the federal civilian and DHS side, but also within DoD, and then I do a lot of work also with state and local organizations around HIPAA compliance as well. With DevSecOps, I think the word I usually use is opportunity, or the two words I use are opportunity and excitement. From a security perspective, at first, of course, I was very skeptical. But then when I realized the opportunity of working across all the different teams and groups and improving that communication, it really is an opportunity. And it's exciting to see when it starts to click and you get that security moving to the left.
I'm Derek Weeks. I'm Vice President at Sonatype. We are based a little north of here in Fulton, Maryland. So I'm one of the local guys. At Sonatype, I do a lot of different things within the community, one of which is acting as a co-founder of the All-Day DevOps Conference. It's the largest DevOps conference globally. Last year we had about 33,000 people show up. It's totally online as an event. As part of that community and my work within that, I work with a lot of the leaders within the DevOps and DevSecOps community to understand the best practices that they're implementing within their organizations, whether it's in public sector or private sector organizations. As part of that, even at the conference last year, we had a DevOps and government track and a DevSecOps track with about 40 practitioners that were speaking during that time. So I'm here to share some of that experience as well as some of what we've done with the annual DevSecOps survey that we run.
Cool. So just to kind of kick off a couple questions, we'll start kind of a little bit high level and then we'll work our way a little deeper. But according to Gartner, by 2021, DevSecOps will be incorporated into 80% of rapid development teams. And panelists, what do you think is driving that shift? Why are we becoming more and more conscientious, and why do you believe security is important in incorporating within development? And Derek, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so this is interesting because, again, I spent a lot of time in discussions on this topic. When you're talking to DevSecOps people that are actually the practitioners doing this, they're like, of course, this makes sense. We need to build security into our development lifecycle. It's only a logical movement, and because I'm doing this, it feels like a grassroots effort. I think there's another, perhaps bigger driver of what's forcing the DevSecOps hand in our organizations. That is the movement of our infrastructure into the cloud. As it moves into the cloud, I think there's a macro level behavior here that's happening with chief security officers and CISOs, where they used to spend a lot of money on network management, network security, endpoint detection. But when that goes up into the cloud and you don't own your perimeter anymore, and you have a $10 million budget, you have to figure out, one, I don't want to lose my budget, I don't want to lose my staff, so you think about, what do I still control? Well, we still own the applications and we still own development, so let's put security there. And they're trying to shift budget, people, resources, and practices into the development lifecycle as kind of a top-down movement because of this I think, macro movement that's happening into the cloud. So while I do see a lot of bottoms-up movement and grassroots movement in the organizations, I think there is a bigger force coming from elsewhere that is changing the budget priorities of CISOs and chief security officers, and it's kind of a who moved my cheese moment for them.
And Sarah, one of the things that I love about your story at USCIS is that you came, the first several years of your time there, you were spent in security, right? Working on the authorization process and compliance and making sure that all the apps and all the environments were, they were authorized and secure. And now you've transitioned to this incredible leader in the DevOps world for DHS. Can you tell us a little bit about both and any kind of changes or taking that experience from security and transitioning it into DevOps, and any advice or best practices you have to share with the audience? Or
Sure.
use case stories?
Yeah, so from the beginning, one of the first things I did was to add that word security into all the contracts that we procured going forward as soon as I was there. And I think it was, probably I had a very different perspective from even the business because, coming from that security side, it was my job when I was on the security world. I built the ongoing authorization program and the continuous monitoring and all of those things where we were rapidly testing and understanding what our security posture was on a regular basis instead of once every 3 years. And that was a huge shift just in and of itself. But then going to the DevOps space, and actually before I left security, I did the risk assessment for how we would, making the decision of whether we would go to Amazon East or GovCloud, and why I actually wrote up the justification for why Amazon East was a better choice for us. And that the risks did not outweigh the cost of being in GovCloud and what we would lose by being there instead of Amazon East, and that was something that I worked on. And so coming to this realization about cloud, and I would add to what this gentleman said, is that it's not just about being in the cloud and not having control over your network, which we still do have control over some of our network pieces, but not every hardware aspect is what we don't have control over. It's not just that, it's the fact of how much faster we can move now to do things in the cloud, and how quickly we can pull new open source software and bring it down and utilize it and pilot it and prototype it and say, hey, is this going to work for us or not? Does this make sense? Or even make choices about software and things that we might want to use, tools that we might want to use. Hey, let me try it real fast and see, is this something that I could easily stand up, and would it be useful for the teams? Yes or no? And if not, well, I wasted 3 months on that instead of 3 years and a procurement and all of those things. And so moving into that mindset and understanding that you've got to be thinking about security really quickly and really early, and how we need to shift security to that innovative mindset as well, so that they can keep up. And it's no longer this whole paperwork drill that we're worried about. What we're worried about is developing things securely, is ensuring that we are secure, is ensuring that we're thinking about that right from the start. We're not worried about this old school methodology, this long process that really doesn't even solve the problem. It doesn't help you secure the system any better. It just, at the end, it tells you what you were like a year ago, because by the time it's over, that old school process only tells you what you're like a year ago, because it probably takes a year to finish, and by then you've rapidly changed. Right. So I mean, for me, the transition was great, and I think it's helped me to work back with the security folks to help them to be more innovative as well. And so it's been a very big partnership. And then of course everything that I build, we will do it securely from the start. Period. And being able to innovate in security from the dev side. So we recently built a crypto erasure solution to handle classified spills in the cloud, because we have systems that have documents that later become retroactively classified. And so then how do you ensure that was really deleted? So that's something that my teams built hand in hand with security, that security needed, and it solved a problem for them and a problem for us, and we were able to work together on that. And there's lots of different things that, I'm like, hey, I want to use this tool, and it's not FedRAMP yet, so let's do assessment right now, And so it's just a partnership. It's important, I think, for people to be innovative even from the security realm. Yeah,
and I think one of the big factors also plays into this is also culture of your organization. Right. And so, Chris, I know that you're a leader at IBM. You do a lot with biometrics and other, in other groups within the federal space. What have you seen from a cultural standpoint, and have you seen any agencies that are trying to kind of move forward to migrate from these traditional development environments into more of a DevOps culture or more into a DevSecOps culture? And what are some best practices, or what have you seen has worked well within those organizations?
Yeah, I think every organization is doing that as they move to the cloud, as they move to modernize their applications. But they're seeing, as Sarah discussed, the speed to get it out. Everyone wants to get the functionality out there faster, and they want to make the process easier. And so then you lay over FISMA and NIST and ATO on top of that, and you say, well, how am I going to get there quicker? So a lot of organizations are doing that. And as you do that, the easy answer is just put more security people on it. But I think what we're seeing is more of a convergence of, the labels are less. If you're a developer, you need to be a security developer or a secure developer. If you're an infrastructure or system administrator, you need to think about security as you're developing it. And then security still has some traditional roles of validating that, but it's happening much faster. It's automation through earlier reviews, and you're not waiting to the end of the process. You're involved early on. So I think those are some of the things that I've seen that, educate developers and system administrators, but on the reverse side, educate your security people who traditionally have been much more of doing reviews and audits. Now you really need to get more into, hands-on and into how to solve some of these challenges and work more closely with developers and system admins and DBAs, et cetera.
Well, and automating the security work.
Yeah, and can we touch on that a little bit? Just within DHS, within your organization, have you guys done anything from an automation standpoint in terms of the security, in terms of the security work? And could you describe a little bit about that?
I mean, all of our tests are automated to the point that they all happen either as a part of the pipeline, or, unless it's, a people question, or a physical control. Otherwise, it's automated. It either happens on a daily basis, or as in scans and config checks, or even, using some of the tools in AWS, we're able to tell when a config check change happens immediately, and then if it goes against the policy rules, it automatically gets rolled back. And so, our stuff is automated as much as humanly possible. I did run into a problem with one of our pipelines where we realized that we weren't actually deploying anything anymore to the pipeline because, just the microservice was kind of done and it was just working as expected. But our pipelines are set up such that they pull down the latest patches as a part of the process automatically.
That's great.
And yeah, except when you're not deploying anything.
Yeah, you're not getting the latest patches.
And so we realized.
In theory, it sounds really nice. You would definitely, FedRAMP authorization on the way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we realized we had to set up automatic deployments even if there's no changes, just to pull down the patches. So that was like a new problem to run into, but it was kind of a cool problem to have, I felt.
Yeah, and then overcome it.
Yeah.
So Derek,
Yeah.
I was just absolutely blown away when I found out that you had a DevSecOps survey that you led for 2018 with over 2,000 participants. I mean, wow, that's fabulous. I am sure you have some really cool insights, metrics more or less that came from that survey that we'd love for you to share with us.
Sure. Yeah. So this is a survey we've run for 5 years now. We always have about 2,000 people or so that participate, and we can kind of track what's happening year over year in DevOps and security-related topics. So the really interesting thing that came from this year's survey, when we were asking people, are you automating security within your development lifecycle? And over the years, we can see not only is automated security entering the development lifecycle, but it's entering in earlier. But when we compared the results in this year's survey of mature DevOps organizations versus organizations that had no DevOps practices, the mature DevOps organizations were deploying automated security throughout the lifecycle 335% more than the no DevOps shops. So it is happening. It's happening, it's not just a buzzword that you might be hearing at a conference. There are real organizations, sizable, at scale, doing this, implementing things across the federal government and private sector. We also ask the follow-up question of, if you're performing automated security, what are you doing? So the big three were web application firewalls, container security, and open source governance. And then you had the DAST, SAST, IAST, and other things kind of trailing off, but those were the big three. I think the big surprise that came from this year's survey, and in some ways the sad part of it was that open source related breaches year over year had increased 50%. In the wake of Equifax happening, you would think there would be more attention pointed to open source governance, open source vulnerabilities. But the reality is we ran the survey initially in 2014, and we asked this question about open source governance, and we asked that during the month that Heartbleed was announced. So we ran the survey in April. Heartbleed was announced April 7th, 2014. So we would have expected a huge spike in open source related breaches or suspected breaches. So we've gone up 121% since Heartbleed. So the attention, even though we're getting attention with the latest logoed vulnerabilities out there related to open source or the Equifax headlines that we're all seeing, we're not doing enough because the hackers are still winning.
And speaking of that, Equifax, I know that you wrote a report. We are all Equifax, and something I found very informative prior to moderating this panel. So it is out there on the web for folks to check out to get some more of those insights. With one thing, because as FedRAMP is near and dear to my heart, Chris, I wanted to ask you a question. One of the things that we talk a lot about in FedRAMP or in any government traditional assessment and authorization model is this concept of an authorization boundary. And so with the introduction of containers, right, boundless technologies, cloud native technologies, how have you been successful in working with government agencies in crafting these boundaries so they know where the scope of these security requirements apply? Do you have any advice for
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And what a lot of agencies are grappling with as they move, and I'm sure Sarah's been through this as well, is you're moving from traditional, I have this many servers and this many endpoints, and I know where my security lives, and I have these boundaries to, now how do I authorize a system? And a lot of agencies look at it system by system traditionally, in their CISO shops and how they authorize, and now the authorization isn't just a system, but it's an overall environment that they're looking at. So similar to FedRAMP, where I've seen some success is where you are kind of expanding that boundary, and what we used to call a general support system now becomes a platform, and you authorize that platform. And then as applications come in, you're not recreating a whole new ATO boundary. You're bringing that application in, but you're bringing it in securely through DevSecOps. If you can combine all those things, that's where I've seen agencies have the most success in getting things ATO'd faster, but still being secure.
Just to touch on that, because I know we just have a couple more minutes, but within DHS, USCIS, you mentioned, and when I think Chris, you mentioned it, but then Sarah, you're like, and it boiled down to the skill set of the development team and ensuring that they have security principles, that they're aware of security principles. Do you have any lessons learned there, Sarah, with your team? I know you have a huge team there within USCIS. Is there anything that you've done to advocate or encourage folks to kind of going outside of their perhaps comfort zone and learning these new security principles or security in general?
Well, I don't really think it's new things that they're learning. I think they just need to understand the requirements in terms of, how they have to secure the system. And really it comes down to just, having that mindset of building something that is inherently secure, that doesn't have all of those vulnerabilities. And so, I would argue that you need less people that are writing documentation and more people that are automating the security thing and working on innovative solutions for larger security problems. And I would also argue that, being in the cloud actually enables you to be much like what you said. It enables us to be way more secure than we were when we were in data centers. And we can respond so much more quickly. And to the other question, we had fun with security with our because we used Chaos Monkey, and so we're just constantly spinning stuff down, spinning it up, and they didn't like it at first, but they came around and they get the concept now. So I mean, it's a fun problem to have.
Yeah. Derek, do you have any closing thoughts on DevSecOps to share with us today?
Yeah, I think I'll just build off of kind of, the expectations of development and security. Part of the big thing about DevOps transformations and DevSecOps transformations is creating empathy. And there are different ways that different organizations have achieved that. How do you get the security mindset into development? Part of it is, I know local organizations that are running hackathons within their own organizations, where it's kind of a capture the flag hackathon, where we're going to try and break into this application. There are different layers that you have to get into, and working with development teams and security teams together to go through that practice to kind of create empathy of how difficult is it to build a secure application, and then how challenging is it to defend that. And the other part in practice is, and again, this varies by organization, but if you don't have security embedded into your development team, either take them and physically move a security person or team inside of the development team where you're physically sitting next to each other, right? You're not going to have that empathy. And you don't have to just move that team. You could build up from the ground up, take developers and create security people out of them because they have the knowledge to understand the challenges that developers are going through to get things to market faster or to release them to the public faster. But you have to find ways in your organization to create that empathy. If you don't have that, the culture will always beat whatever technology you're trying to bring in to solve a problem.
But I think when you bring the testing into the pipeline and you give the developers the results immediately, then they automatically become security practitioners because they see what the results are, the testing results, and they are responsible for ensuring that there are no vulnerabilities. So, I mean, and then inherently if you have, automation developers that want to automate everything, which is, the teams that you want to buy, then they will, want to do that once and not do it repeatedly. And so it breeds that culture.
I think that, yeah, there's a lot of experiences on how to go about doing that. You can't flip a switch one day and make that happen,
That's
but building the empathy over time into the organization through practices like that. Day one, we're going to take an easy approach. Month 3, we're going to make things a little more strict. Month 6, we're totally locked down, and you can bring that into your organization without jolting the organization. And
Sometimes a jolt is needed.
And so, Chris, final word?
I would
Any
agree
parting
with
thoughts?
both sides that empathy is important. I think a lot of what I run into is, as a security person, I'm coming in and I'm seen as the roadblock. And so how do we get around that? When you move either you empathize with what I'm trying to accomplish, or you kind of move the accountability to the developer or whoever it is, then both of those strategies, I think, can work to move things forward.
Great. Well, thank you very much to Red Hat and putting on this fabulous panel. Thank you to each one of you. And with that, we will conclude. Thank you for your time.